Actually, I came to know 15 years before through Father Sebastian Perianan, our former rector, who repeatedly used to tell me, call Felix, call him here to St. Peter's, call him here, you will see the change. And begin to read that book, get hold of that book. Just last month it was published, he said, Asian Public Theology. And I was preparing to go abroad and to go to Rome for my doctoral studies. And that was the first book I started reading for my research. And my whole view about the reconceptualized missiology, about missiology, it was completely changed, my whole view. Therefore, the department also owes a lot to him. He has been also the visiting faculty of our department for past 13 years, 13, 14 years. It came as a great shock. And, many people also sent me the condolence messages, our former students who have also been the students of Professor Felix. And they said, I'm sure, Father, you will not be able to accept this rude shock. And he was your father figure, also he was your mentor. And Father has left a vacuum which cannot be filled also in the near future for at least 2-3 more decades. I don't think I'm exaggerating. But I am hopeful Father will help us through his intercession. We not only pray for him, we can also pray to him, I believe. That was also his life of complete integrity. It was so edifying. We have visited, our students have visited the center periodically. Every batch will visit the center, and every year Father will come. You have seen his personal lifestyle also. We hardly imagined that we all thought he would go on for at least 20 more years. I would like to, before I finish, only describe only 2 instances which come to my mind right now. In one of the conferences, Father Felix just had arrived. He was sitting in the parlor. I just told Father Legrand, he asked, has Father Felix arrived? He said, in the parlor, I said. He was in the auditorium, Father Legrand. And I told him, he ran to meet Father Felix, Father Lucien Legrand. And that speaks volumes for the stature of Father Felix. Another instance, just last year, there was a symposium by the Department of Missiology, symposium of where we had also invited Dabre. We were talking, he asked who all have come, Lawrence. And, Father Michael Amadas has come already, keynote address he is giving. Yes. Father Felix also, I said. The moment I said, his reaction showed me the amount of reverence he had for Felix, or even kind of, the hesitation, like, that means a theologian of such a stature, I'm going to speak like. So that was the stature of Father Felix, and it was a colossal loss, and no words to describe, definitely, about his loss. And we are at a loss as to what to say. Anyway, we will continue. We all join together. We will do our best. And our students also will be with us to continue the legacy of Father Felix. Thank you, Father James, for this wonderful opportunity.
Thank you, Dr. Lawrence, Anthony Lawrence, for your beautiful words, recalling the personal touch that Professor Felix had with you and with the Institute, and raising the Institute to the next level of academic leadership. Thank you so much. Now I call upon Professor Clooney, Francis Clooney. Professor Francis Clooney is one of the most distinguished comparative theologians of our times, and he hails from Harvard University Divinity School. Now I call upon him to deliver his message to us.
Thank you, Father James. I hope you can hear me.
Yeah, we can, yeah.
So I begin by expressing my personal condolences to all of you who worked with him most closely. You, Father James, Ms. Nirmal, Father Patrick, and others who were there all the time. So I express you my deep condolences. I met Father Felix first, I think, back when the chair of Christianity at the university had just been founded. I believe his predecessor was Father Thomas George, perhaps, some name like that. And Felix was up and coming. And this was maybe 40 years ago. So we met then when I was in Madras in those days. And we met many times over the years. Most recently, we met at the Lutheran Gurukul in the summer of 2023, when Father James and Felix and I went over there for a session where I gave a talk and they were discussants and panelists for the talk. We had nice conversations at lunch at the university and then in the car over to the Gurukul and back. Our work did not overlap entirely. I was more in the comparative, the Hindu-Christian studies, Felix, Asian theology, intercultural theology, but he was endlessly gracious to me all the time that we met over the years. So many invitations when I would come to Madras to speak at the university in his department, sometimes a joint session with the Department of Vaishnavism or another department. And then when he shifted to the Asian Center for Cross-Cultural Studies, he was continually gracious there and would have me down. Occasionally I'd stay overnight. And he always set up some panel or discussion for my work, and again, was always very gracious. I think it was about 25 years ago that I was able to arrange for him to spend 2 semesters at Boston College, the Jesuit Catholic University in Boston, where I was teaching until 2005. And he was a very welcome member of our faculty, appreciated much by our students. And just about 2 years ago, when he gave the Duffy lectures at BC, I was honored to be a respondent for one of his sessions and to take him out to dinner afterwards. So Felix has always been, as everyone has been saying, gracious and welcoming. But I took a moment yesterday to look back at some of his writing, which many of you, I'm sure, know better than I. I think the first book I had run into was the edited book, Leave the Temple, Indian Paths to Human Liberation, 1992. And his name kind of popped up on my screen, and then I began to understand Felix and his work. More recently, Christians for a Better India. I have the book on my desk right now, 2014, and the Theology for an Inclusive World in 2019. And what impresses me in these books is how Felix was always grounded as a Catholic theologian, understanding his place in the church in South Asia and India, and making connections widely east, west, north, and south, with the educated class, with the universities, with the poorest parishioners in a parish, with people in the villages, and inspiring others to do the same. The work was so interconnected. And I think that's why, hearing many of the testimonies now, he's so much appreciated as a figure, both in the Asian context and also in a global theological context, the global church, as a person who can make these things work back and forth. I was thinking also of the 2 projects I was a little bit involved in, the Oxford Handbook for Christianity in Asia, which was a monumental task, and it had many ups and downs along the way. But Felix was our fearless leader, and cajoling and getting authors to contribute their articles, to correct them, coming up with a very fine handbook that I think will stand the test of time for some years. And the wonderful International Journal for Asian Christianity, which I was, again, happy to contribute to a couple of times, mainly due to Felix's generosity of inviting me to be involved. But what strikes Sorry, I was just muted. Somebody muted me for a moment. I'm back. What I conclude by saying is that the works I've mentioned, these writings are so interconnected theologically, globally, the church, east, west, north, and south, but that is beautifully reflected in Felix's own personality, that he was always a man for relationships, always honoring those to whom he spoke, always welcoming the outsider, the visitor to his places, and even when he traveled to places like Boston, he was always gracious in making so many connections. So I'm happy, honored to be part of this memorial for him today, and to honor a man who is always gracious and will be perhaps an inspiration for us, both as scholars and persons, for many years to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Tuli, for your very meaningful words of relationship with Professor Felix and telling us how he was globally connected, a person who always believed in dialogue and understanding between cultures and peoples. Thank you so much. Now over to Dr. Johnson Silvai Pillai, formerly the Dean of Theology of St. Paul's Seminary. Over to Johnson. Johnson, can you unmute yourself?
Unmute. Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, we could hear you.
So thank you so much for giving this opportunity to say a few words about for Professor Dr. Felix Wilfred. And hello?
We could hear you, yeah.
Yeah. Indeed, so I'm in shock and so far I have not come out of the shock of his death. Yet he's not only most of us is not only our mentor, master, and for me personally, he's like a father figure that I can say because I know him from the days of theology in St. Paul's Seminary. And also, I did my doctorate in the Catholic University of Leuven based on his complete work in comparative study of Dr. Felix Wilfred and Deity and Power. So, his close contact, even he came to Leuven for my final doctoral defense. And I see Father Professor Dr. Felix is a man with a messianic spirit always, moving towards or centering his thoughts and action towards the formation of a better and relevant ecclesial community in today's context, especially in India and Asia. Though his contribution is worldwide, is very much rooted in our context. And he's not only mere an intellectual, but rather I would say is a great genius. Why I mentioned the word genius means, according to an American scholar, Ralph Waldo Emerson, genius is the activity which repairs the decay of things. I see this is the spirit very much in Dr. Felix. He was always preoccupied with the spirit to repair and to recreate, and by which always creative, which is very much sacramental. Because this is a role, in the ordinary faith, we read through the meaning of sacramental living. That way I could see the spirit of the sacramentality in the existence of our beloved father, Dr. Felix. He was an instrument to bring forth the blessings of God to his students, colleagues, such leaders, ordinary people, and especially to the poor and the needy through his solidarity, thoughts, and beautiful, meaningful writings. Even before the dawn of 2024 synodal perspective, he was expressing the glimpses of synodality through his authentic engagement with the church. Again, I would like to quote, to end my expressions, Harriet Beecher Stowe, an American activist who fought for the freedom of the Black people. She once wrote like this: when you get into a tight place and everything goes against you until it seems that you cannot hold on for a minute longer, never give up then, for that is just the place and time when the tide will turn. Why I'm bringing this idea means, is this particular writer is empowering the people, those who are struggling for freedom, and allowing them to get the spirit to fight against the odds and also the struggle. Exactly that way, I see Father Felix as a tireless warrior in the field of multidiscipline, the theological endeavor, kneeling before God to our Lord Jesus Christ to complete his work till his last breath. And that is the greatest spirit I could see in our Father, Dr. Felix Wilfred, a great man, a great thinker, and a great human being, and a great fatherly figure. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Johnson. You have beautifully shared your experience as a Felix, as a tireless warrior, a spirit which refused to die down, but always was willing to recreate and renew and to think ahead, especially on behalf of the people on the margins. Thank you so much for your beautiful words. Now I turn to the next speaker, Dr. Bubbles Beverly Ashore, Assistant Professor from De La Salle University, Manila. Over to you, Dr. Bubbles.
Hey, thank you very much. Can you hear me? Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much to James, to Nirmal, and all organizers for these special memorial for all of us to pay tribute to and celebrate the life of a very special person. And before that, I would like to express my deep condolences to Father Felix's family and friends. So I first met Father Felix in February just last year in 2024 for the launch event of the Initiative for the Study of Asian Catholics, or what we call ISAC. It is a network of scholars working on Asian Catholics, and we are hosted at the National University of Singapore. But we just recently opened a research hub or an office in Manila, Philippines, where we are developing what we call Digital Catholicism Project. So Father Felix and Father James traveled, now I know, a very long distance from Chennai to Manila, and to support young scholars, relatively younger scholars like me, James, Bernardo Brown, and Michelle Chambon. We are the 4 coordinators of ISAC in our endeavors and vision to research Asian Catholics using social scientific methods and theories within the Asian region. I will be eternally grateful to Father Felix for his generous efforts, not only to share ISAC and my own foresight and aspiration of decentering the study of Asian Catholicism by proactively supporting, as we have heard from today's testimonies, of supporting network and groups and individual scholars. He did that very well. During his visit in Manila, ISAC organized a panel at the 10th International Conference of the Philippine Association for the Study of Culture, History, and Religion. And in this panel, we titled Sociocultural Realities of Asia and an Emerging Field of Catholic Studies in Asia. We, myself, Dr. Michelle Chambon, Father James Panaya, and Father Jose Mario Francisco of Ateneo de Manila University, we paid tribute to one of the works of Professor Felix entitled Christianity in Hindu Polytheistic Structural Mold. By what we did in that panel is to revisit and rethink the question, still a perennial question posed by Father Felix, such as what is really the full salience and social significance of Christianity in the contemporary societies shared not just in India or South Asia, but also in other parts of Asia? And what are the major obstacles to the success of Christianity as a source or resource of social power? And in his visit in Manila, he presented me with a book, one of his seminal contributions to Asian theology, titled For a Socially Engaged Faith. And in this book, I realized I started to think of Father Felix because I'm a sociologist, that I think I was odd. But even if he is a theologian, and many sociologists are very critical of theologians and religious studies people, but I think Father Felix in his book, those that I have read so far, logical imagination. I think that overlapping. Yeah, I think I can move forward. So as I was saying, what happens during online online gathering, but we move forward again. So what I was trying to say is that even if Father Felix is a theologian, other people from other disciplines like social sciences, we are able to connect people's grounded experience to what we call as the larger social structures, which I find his work to be very rich in. After the Manila visit, Father Felix and I continued working together in my capacity as a reviewer for some articles for IJAC, and in Father Felix's role as editor-in-chief. And there are three things that I will always remember, and I'm sure most of us here would remember about him. As an editor-in-chief, he has this preeminent professionalism. Second, he has a demand for excellence. And third, upholding academic standards. When I am way behind schedule, when I'm late for the article reviews, he had a way of reminding me of the deadliest deadline by having subject in the email as SOS. And this gave me a high level of Catholic guilt and shame. So as a result, I would send my reviews within a day or 2 to 3 days, but I was late for a month. But because I was very guilty and he had a way of making me feel guilty, then I would submit. But at the same time, he was not ungenerous at all in offering positive comments, even offering compliments and praises on the reviewer's evaluation and assessment, which is rare because usually we do not give compliments to the reviewer. We just say, thank you for your contribution. But Father Felix would offer, yeah, this is an excellent review. Thank you so much for your effort. This means that Father Felix painstakingly and thoroughly and methodically read all reviews and articles, not just making it like a machine, like being an editor-in-chief, like a machine, but appreciating each review that we all gave to the journal. So these reflected his decision, his dedication, his devotion to his work as an editor-in-chief. I was also very fortunate to meet Father Felix together with Father James and Dr. Mara Mata for 2 dinners when we visited him in Chennai just last December 2024. During these because I was visiting Chennai at the time to deliver a talk at the University of Madras, I was very surprised that he was generous to offer me to stay in his home. But of course, I didn't like to trouble him at all because I think, to have a visitor and you have to attend to the visitor. So I politely declined. But this also showed how generous he was and very gracious to people, even if, we're basically strangers, as it were. So during these 2 dinners, those were 2 nights, we had the honor and pleasure, for me at least, to know Father Felix at a more personal level, his love and appreciation for paintings and art, his library full of books, his great interest in global, international, and national politics based on our conversation, which vary from Brexit to Trump to migration and refugees issues. I was even joking to Mara that maybe he called us again for a second dinner to discuss about Brexit, because that was the question he raised. So what do you think about Brexit? So I was like, oh, this is rather strange. But during that dinner, we complimented him for looking very young, looking very healthy, that he looks way younger for his age. He looked like in his 50s. And I think I even told him that he would live 20 more years or 30 more years to take care of all the things that we are all working together in Asian Christianity and other topics. So through this conversations, I came to know his warmth and empathy. He didn't, sorry, I'm still confused with the past tense and present tense. So I would recall his warmth and empathy to listen to other people's stories, not just to hear, but to really listen. And listening here means that he was curious to learn more, even if it is obvious that he knows way more than we do, that he is he's full of wisdom more than we do, but he was very curious to learn more, to inquire more. And also during these conversations, he told us, I think we recall, Mara and I could recall that his life as a very young seminarian in Italy and how he came to love cheese, which at the beginning he didn't like at all, which many Asians didn't like, but it grows on you and eventually you love to eat cheese. So we have lost a brilliant mind. India lost a valuable scholar and theologian. His family, lost a beloved uncle, cousin, brother, and for many of us, a mentor, a friend, and a wonderful human being. Thank you very much, and farewell to Professor Felix Wilfred.
Thank you, Dr. Bubbles Beverly Masur. Now over to Maria Therese Walker. She's a retired professor and former concilium member who worked with Professor Felix probably over 2 decades. Over to Dr. Maria Therese Walker.
Good evening. Do you hear me?
Yeah, we could, yeah.
Fine. At first, I want to give a thanks to you, the organizers, for having this beautiful meeting. I'm speaking here, as you said, as a retired professor at the Faculty of Catholic Theology in Münster, Germany, and as a former member of the editorial board of Concilium. First, I want to express my deepest sadness at the death of Felix Wilfred. For me, he was like immortal. May he rest in eternal peace. Felix Wilfred was always very welcome at our Münsteren faculty. We had him here several times for seminars, for conferences, and his interventions were always wise and prophetic at the same time. My first encounter with him has almost magical dimensions. He was asked to celebrate at the end of the conference a mass in our campus church. His sermon, by the way, in perfect German, his sermon was based on the famous parable of the elephant that a group of blind people tried to describe simply by touching and feeling parts of its shape. Just as he was coming to his conclusion that knowledge of the divine is always subjective and fragmentary, the evening sun broke through the stained glass windows and bathed his face in radiant, multicolored light. This might be a fitting image to remember Felix Wilfred and to look at him and his work. During his last visit in Münster, he contributed to an international conference on religious identities in a globalized world, and he gave a lecture on religious cosmopolitanism. I am amazed to see that in his book issued in 21 on religious identities and the global South, Porous Boundaries and Novel Paths, he refers to his Münsteren conference as the beginnings of this book. So there were porous boundaries between Chennai and Münster, and we used them to go novel paths together. In particular, I want to remember the role of Felix Wilfred for Concilium, the international theological journal founded during Vatican II. Felix Wilfred was a member of its editorial board since 1998, as far as I know, and so he was well aware of the difficult years